The first time she saw me, I was kneeling in the dirt beside a broken irrigation gate with my sleeves rolled up and mud on both hands. She arrived in a black Range Rover that had no business being on that road. The tires crunched over gravel. The engine stopped. A door opened. And a woman in a cream coat stepped out like the mountains were a meeting she had not agreed to attend. I did not look up right away. The board in front of me was warped, split down the grain, and if I pulled it wrong, the whole fence section would lean into the ditch by morning. So I kept working. She waited exactly 12 seconds before she spoke. My father said you needed a wife. That finally made me stop. I set the board down. I stood slowly. She was tall, polished, expensive, and clearly irritated that I had not reacted the way men usually reacted when she entered a space. Her name was Camille Mercer, Chief Executive Officer of Mercer Care Health, 23 clinics, 9 urgent care centers, more than 600 employees across Colorado. A woman who could make a room of board members sit straighter just by taking off her glasses. I knew all of that before she drove onto my farm. She did not know anything about me. To her, I was just the quiet widower next door. A man in dusty boots with a daughter, a bad fence, and a house that still needed paint. She looked at me like she had been sent to deliver a sentence and wanted to leave before it turned into a conversation. I wiped one hand on my jeans. Then I said the only thing that came to mind. Your father was right about the problem. Her face changed. Just slightly, I continued. He was wrong about the solution. For the first time since stepping out of the Range Rover, Camille Mercer had nothing to say. My name is Elias Ward. I am 41 years old. I live outside Ridgway, Colorado, on a small farm that belonged to my late wife's family. My daughter, Nora, is 9. She reads soil charts for fun, labels seed jars by date and moisture level, and believes most adults would make fewer mistakes if they stopped talking before they understood the map. She is usually right. We moved there 3 years after my wife, Laurel, died. People in town assumed I moved because grief made me simple. They saw a man repairing fence posts, cleaning irrigation lines, stacking hay, and driving an old Ford with a cracked windshield. They did not ask what I had done before. I did not offer. There are parts of a life you do not carry into town unless someone needs them. Ray Mercer became my neighbor the year before I arrived. 72 years old. Retired founder of Mercer Care Health. Sharp eyes. Bad knees. A patient silence that told me he had spent most of his life listening to people lie professionally. Our first conversation happened because his heifer broke through my south fence and stood in my water trough like she owned the place. I walked her back. Ray brought coffee 2 mornings later. After that, every Friday, he stood at the fence with 2 mugs. We never named it friendship. Men like us do not always name the things that keep us standing. Camille visited him once a month from Denver. I saw her from a distance. Black Range Rover. Phone in one hand. Coat over one arm. A woman who entered her father's porch like a CEO entering a room that happened to have mountains around it. Ray mentioned her often. Not in the way fathers brag. In the way fathers worry. She carries too much alone, he said one Friday. Most people do when no one teaches them how to put anything down. He looked at me over the rim of his coffee. You sound like a man who learned that badly. I did. A week later, Camille drove onto my property and told me her father said I needed a wife. What Ray had actually said, I learned later, was that I needed someone near me who understood that silence was not emptiness. Camille heard it as matchmaking. She was wrong, but not completely. Her first excuse for returning was an easement issue. Mercer Care owned 3 acres beside Ray's property, land left over from a wellness retreat expansion that never happened. There was an old irrigation ditch crossing 3 boundaries, a maintenance clause nobody had updated since 1988, and a fence line that had shifted 6 feet over 10 years because the creek had been eating the bank in silence. She arrived with a folder. I already had the maps. I set 2 folding chairs on the porch, placed a board across them like a table, and unrolled the title chain. Camille stared. You pulled county filings? Yes. This is not a county filing. This is a full title history. Yes. You studied my company's parcel? I studied the ditch. That is not an answer. It is the only useful one. She did not smile. But she did not leave. I showed her the original easement. The maintenance split. The 2003 amendment. The forgotten access clause that made Mercer Care responsible for half the fence and all drainage repairs downstream from the 3rd marker. She read the notes twice. You know property language, she said. I know consequences. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Dorian Vale, Chief Operating Officer. She ignored it. Then it rang again. This time she answered. I'm in Ridgeway, she said. The voice on the other end went quiet. Not silent. Quiet. I heard only one sentence. We need to move before the board asks for another review. Camille hung up. She tried to look as though nothing had changed. But something had. The next time she came, she did not bring a folder. She brought questions. Mercer Care was considering a sale to a national chain called Northbridge Health. The offer was enormous. $410 million. Dorian Vale called it a growth opportunity. A clean transition. A way to protect the company from rising costs. But Camille said the words the way someone repeats a phrase she does not fully trust. We walked the fence line while Nora followed 10 yards behind us with a notebook, pretending not to listen. Camille said, My father built Mercer Care for small towns. Northbridge says they will preserve the rural clinics. What does the contract say? She looked at me. They said the operating commitments are in a side schedule. Are they binding? A pause. They say yes. That is not an answer. She stopped walking. For a moment, she looked angry. Not at me. At the fact that she knew I was right. Nora appeared beside us and held out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Ham and cheddar, she said. Dad forgets lunch when legal language is around. Camille took the sandwich carefully, like it was an object from another country. Thank you. Nora looked at her shoes. Don't sell the clinics if the people buying them use soft words. Then she walked back toward the house. Camille watched her go. She is very direct. She is 9. That explains it? No. It just makes it harder for adults to argue. The next week, I drove to Denver for the first time in 4 years. I parked 2 blocks from Mercer Care headquarters and left a manila envelope at the front desk. No signature. No return address. Inside were 12 pages. A handwritten analysis of the Northbridge sales structure. The Rural Clinic Preservation Clause. The side schedule. The debt conversion trigger. The board voting provision Dorian Vale had said was inactive. And the case law his attorney had cited to prove it expired. The case had not expired the clause. The case had been reversed on appeal. Buried. Hard to find, but still law. At the top of the first page, I wrote one sentence. The protection clause is still alive. Ask Dorian why he told you it died. Then I drove home. I did not wait to see her face when she read it. Some truths work better when they arrive without a man standing beside them asking to be admired. Camille called me at 8:53 that night. "Who are you?" she asked. I was standing in the barn, checking the heat lamp over 2 weak lambs. Someone who read the wrong contract too late once. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have earned. She was quiet. Then she said, "Dorian knew." "Yes. The clause gives my family trust veto power if the sale threatens rural access." "Yes. He told the board it expired." "Yes. And if I had signed North Bridge, they could close 8 rural clinics within 18 months. Within 12, if they used the utilization trigger." I heard her breathing change. "Why did you help me?" I looked toward the farmhouse window. Nora was at the kitchen table under yellow light, labeling seed packets. "Because somebody helped me once," I said, "and I did not listen fast enough." She came to the farm that night. No Range Rover arrogance. No polished distance. Just headlights on gravel and a woman with a company in one hand and a betrayal in the other. I was sitting on the porch steps when she walked up. This time, she did not begin with a joke. She stood in front of me and said, "Tell me what happened to you." So I did. Not all of it. Enough. 12 years earlier, I had been deputy finance officer at Halden Medical Supply. A quiet company. Good people. Bad leadership. I saw warning signs in a merger contract. Debt hidden inside vendor guarantees. Clinic supply obligations turned into optional performance targets. A control transfer buried in a side schedule. I asked one question too late. By the time I understood the structure, the merger had closed. 2 years later, Halden collapsed. Small clinics lost supply access. People lost jobs. My wife, who had tried to flag the patient access risk from her firm's side, was pushed into legal testimony she never should have had to carry alone. She died driving home from a deposition in a snowstorm. I did not say the contract killed her. Life is not that simple. But some decisions put people on roads they should not have been on. After that, I left Denver. I chose dirt, fence posts, and a daughter who needed a father more than the world needed another man with a title. Camille sat beside me on the step. Not close. Just there. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I almost signed it." "But you didn't." "Because you left an envelope. Because your father taught you to read what people try to rush." She looked toward Ray's porch, light across the field. "He knew about you?" "He knew enough." The emergency board meeting was called for Thursday at 10 a.m. Camille walked into the room with no speech. Only documents. Dorian Vale sat near the head of the table, calm, expensive, and ready to be offended. He had already told 2 board members that Camille was becoming emotionally compromised by outside influence from a rural neighbor with no relevant background. Camille let him finish. Then she placed the trust clause on the screen. The original charter, the rural access protection, the extension filing her father had quietly renewed 3 years earlier. The case Dorian's lawyer cited. The reversal Dorian's memo omitted. Then she placed my handwritten analysis beside his legal memo. Line by line. False assumption. Omitted appeal. Misstated expiration. Unreported conflict. Dorian's face changed only once. When Camille showed the board his private consulting agreement with Northbridge. $8 million. Payable after closing. The room became very still. One board member asked for a recess. Another asked for counsel. Ray Mercer, sitting at the far end in his old gray suit, did not say a word. He only watched his daughter become the person he had hoped she would be when the room finally demanded it. The vote took 11 minutes. Northbridge sale rejected. Independent audit authorized. Dorian Vale suspended from all authority pending investigation. 3 board members who had supported his memo resigned within the month. By spring, Mercer Care was still independent. The rural clinic stayed open. Camille promoted her general counsel, Priya Sloan, to acting COO because Priya had been warning quietly for years and no one had listened loudly enough. Ray's health improved when he stopped pretending retirement meant not worrying. Nora started spending Wednesday afternoons at his house studying old topographic maps. He taught her contour lines. She taught him which weeds meant the soil was holding too much water. Camille came to the farm more often. At first, always with a reason. A document. A question. A board update. Then one evening she arrived with no folder at all. Just a paper bag of apples from the market. Nora inspected them. Fuji, she said. Is that bad? Not bad, just overconfident. Camille laughed. I had not expected that sound to fit on my porch. But it did. Months passed. Dorian's civil case moved forward. Northbridge found easier targets. Mercer Care rebuilt its governance. And I kept repairing fence posts. One Friday in late March, Camille walked out to the boundary line between my land and the 3 acres Mercer Care still owned. I was there, planting bare-root apple trees. She stood beside the fence. Your offer closed yesterday, she said. I pressed soil around the roots. I know. You bought the parcel at full market rate. Yes. Why? I looked at the line of new trees. Because some boundaries stop mattering when people stop using them as walls. She did not answer for a while. Across the field, Nora ran toward Ray's house with a book under one arm. Ray sat on his porch, pretending not to watch us. The mountains held the last orange light of the day. Camille leaned her arms on the fence. You know, she said, my father never said you needed a wife. I know. He said you needed someone who understood what silence costs. I looked at her then. And did you? She looked out at the valley. I am learning. We stood there until the light lowered behind the ridge. Nothing dramatic happened. No announcement. No promise. No perfect sentence. Just 2 people at a fence that no longer needed to divide anything. That is how some lives change. Not with a speech. Not with a kiss in the rain. Not with a boardroom applauding. Sometimes a life changes because someone leaves the right envelope. Someone reads it. Someone does not sign the wrong thing. And a quiet man, who once lost too much by speaking too late, finally speaks in time. So if you had met me by that fence, wearing dusty boots and fixing a broken gate, what would you have seen? A farmer? A widower? A man who had given up? Or would you have wondered why I knew exactly where the land had shifted under everyone's feet? Tell me in the comments. Because sometimes the person who looks like he has stepped away from the world is the only one who can see where the ground is about to collapse.